Hello again. I don't suppose that many viewers will be familiar with William Pitt, who was Britain's youngest ever Prime Minister. He took the post in 1783 when he was just 24 years of age. Even at that age, though, he was capable of some pretty impressive speeches and had a nice turn of phrase. Just before becoming Prime Minister, he said that necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Well, this is, of course, absolutely true. It is only by arguing that this or that illiberal measure is necessary that those in power are able to get people to accept whatever infringement of their freedom they have in mind. Now, of course, for a Prime Minister or other ambitious person in the government, the motive for interfering in our lives and limiting or restricting our liberty is quite obvious. After all, why do people get involved in government in the first place? Whether it's becoming a councillor in a local authority or fighting your way to becoming Prime Minister of Britain or President of the United States, there are really just three things motivating people. The first is, of course, money. Even just being a councillor on a committee in an unremarkable suburb somewhere in Britain or America can bring in money. In some areas, the real business relating to local building development is carried out not in the town hall, but rather at the golf course, where somebody from the planning committee plays around with a man who owns a firm of builders. Corrupt practices of this kind are common, and when you're in the government in London or Washington, the chances of making real money are even better. The second motive is being important and well known. This can range from seeing your picture in the local paper, if you're a councillor, and perhaps opening a new library, or giving speeches which people can see on national television, if you're in the national government. For some people, this is really intoxicating, and simply being famous is enough to satisfy them. The third thing which draws people into politics is a desire to boss folk around and to tell them what to do. This desire ranges from simply being a busybody all the way through to aspiring to be a dictator with unlimited power to control the lives of others. In democracies like Britain and America, of course, you have to give a good reason to make people do something which they do not want to do, or to stop them from doing something which they do wish to do. The simplest reason is, as Pitt remarked, necessity. For some people, this business of ordering other people around is an end in itself. You might say that they get off on power, simply for the sake of it. Obviously, they need an excuse to forbid some things and make others compulsory, which is where the claim of necessity comes into it. Suppose, for example, that you take it into your head to close all the churches in the country and forbid people from gathering together to pray and worship God. This is something which many tyrants have done over the centuries. Very popular in communist dictatorships, of course, that sort of thing. If you are a dictator, you don't really have to explain your actions. But in a democracy, you'd better tell people that this is necessary for their own good. We saw this earlier this year. Or perhaps you want to forbid people from getting together for Christmas dinner. Oliver Cromwell and the Puritans did this, of course, and so did the present administration in Britain. Cromwell was, of course, a military dictator, so it was easy for him to do. He just issued an order and the army enforced it. In a democracy, you tell people that it is necessary for their own good. So far, all this is easily understood. Boris Johnson and his henchmen like bossing people about and are able to cite necessity, as Pitt called it, the argument of tyrants. And make no mistake about it, this is tyranny. We knew that it was tyranny when churches were closed down in communist or fascist dictatorships, it is every bit as tyrannical if you do it by amending a 40-year-old law like the 1984 Public Health Act and do not bother asking Parliament's approval for doing so. That's tyranny as well. Forbidding people from leaving the country was tyrannical when the Soviets did it in the 1970s, and it was just as tyrannical when done in this country earlier this year. There is not a ha'porth of difference between those actions, one by communist dictators and the other by an elected government. I understand all this very well, that people in government enjoy pushing us around because they are able to do so. It's a basic human drive. Necessity is the argument of tyrants. That is absolutely right. So far, there's nothing surprising about any of this. It is simply the essential nature of government, pushing people around and telling them what to do. It is when we come to the second part of that quotation by Pitt that we come up against something strange. This is the ready acceptance of all this by those against whom it is directed. That is to say, almost everybody seemed quite willing to put up with any number of infringements on their freedom in the name of necessity in the last few years. This is indeed the creed of slaves, simply following baffling and irrational orders purely and simply because the government says that they are necessary for your own safety, your own good. I saw two good examples of this the other day at church, one dating from some years ago, but still there to see. When Blair's government was busy banning as many things as it could think of, for no other reason that they enjoyed doing so, smoking was forbidden not only in pubs but also any place where people worked. Not only that, a law was passed making it mandatory to display a notice to this effect in a prominent place, telling everybody that smoking was forbidden there. In the whole of my life, I have never ever seen anybody smoke in a church, and I've never even heard of such a thing. But there by the entrance to the church, which I attended last week, is a large sign warning people not to smoke. It's completely pointless and useless and unnecessary, but we've been told that it's got to be there, and so it's stuck up in a place where no one would dream of smoking. Big sign saying smoking is forbidden on these premises. The second instance was when I took part in the service, and I mentioned this the other day. The rules state that you can sing without wearing a mask, but that you must wear one when you are sitting down quietly. So it was that everybody wore masks while sitting and listening to the Bible readings, and then they removed them when they stood up and belted out a carol. Whatever was going on here had nothing at all to do with the control of disease and everything to do with the control of people. They had been given utterly mad instructions to follow, which were likely to spread germs at the best of times, but they followed the rules because they were told that this was a matter of necessity. This really is the creed of slaves, following meaningless rituals merely because the authorities say that it is necessary and will keep you safe, even when you know logically that it's nothing of the kind. The thing I'm puzzled by is just when we became a nation of slaves like that, following any bizarre instruction, if only we are told that necessity is behind it.